Imagine walking into a room full of people who want nothing more than to break you. They toss insults, make false assumptions, and try desperately to pull a reaction out of you. They wait for you to defend yourself, to stutter, to get angry. But instead of shouting, instead of explaining yourself, you look them directly in the eyes and say absolutely nothing. A heavy, suffocating silence fills the air. Seconds pass. The room gets cold. Suddenly, the very people who tried to destroy you begin to fidget. They start talking over themselves, rambling, exposing their own deepest insecurities, and handing you total control of the room. Without raising your voice, without making a single argument, you have won the war before it even started. What is the terrifying psychological power hidden inside total silence? Why do the most respected, feared, and unshakable figures in human history treat their words like rare, lethal ammunition? And what is the silent mistake you are making every single day that secretly drains your authority, causes people to walk all over you, and destroys your inner peace? Stick with me, because the Stoic secrets of silence are about to transform the way the world treats you forever. To understand why talking less instantly multiplies your power, we have to look back at ancient Athens, a city dominated by loud, dramatic politicians who spent hours shouting speeches just to hear the sound of their own voices. Every orator tried to out-talk the other, using big words and theatrical outrage to gain applause. But sitting in the corner of the assembly was a man named Phocion. Phocion was a brilliant general and statesman, but he was known throughout Greece for something terrifying. He almost never spoke. While other politicians paced back and forth, waving their arms and crying out to the crowds, Phocion sat entirely still, his arms folded, his face as unreadable as stone. Whenever Demosthenes, the greatest and most feared speaker in all of Athens, saw Phocion stand up from his seat, Demosthenes would lean over to his friends and whisper in terror, "There arises the axe that will chop down my speech." Think about that. Demosthenes wasn't afraid of another loud politician. He wasn't afraid of someone who had prepared a 2-hour argument. He was terrified of the man who spoke 3 sentences, cut straight through the noise, and shattered hours of empty rhetoric in 10 seconds. When Phocion opened his mouth, people listened as if the gods themselves had spoken. Why? Because his words were so rare that every single syllable carried the weight of gold. Now look at the modern world around you. Look at how most people live today. We are terrified of quiet moments. The second a conversation pauses, panic sets in. We rush to fill the void with meaningless chatter, nervous laughing, over-explaining our choices, and blabbering about our personal lives to people who haven't earned the right to hear them. We dump our thoughts, our insecurities, and our plans into the air, completely blind to the fact that with every unnecessary word that leaves our lips, our authority leaks out into the room. The ancient Stoics recognized this tragic flaw in human nature over 2,000 years ago. They understood that the urge to talk constantly comes from a place of deep insecurity. It comes from a desperate need to be validated, understood, and liked by others. But here is the brutal truth that society will never tell you. When you talk too much, you broadcast to the entire world that you cannot control your own mind. Let that sink in. There is a famous story about the ancient philosopher Xenocrates. He was known as a man of extreme discipline and quiet dignity. One evening he was sitting among a group of men who were drunkenly boasting, arguing and insulting one another. Throughout the entire night, Xenocrates said nothing. Finally, one of the men turned to him frustrated and demanded, "Why are you sitting there like a statue? Why don't you speak?" Xenocrates looked at the man calmly and replied, "I have often regretted speaking, but I have never once regretted remaining silent." How many times in your life have you laid awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, replaying a conversation in your head, cringing at something foolish you said? How many times have you blurted something out in anger, overshared a secret, or made a promise you couldn't keep, only to spend days, weeks, or years dealing with the catastrophic consequences? Silence never betrays you. Silence never misquotes you. Silence never makes a fool out of you. The first fundamental rule of silence is simple yet brutal. Never speak unless what you are about to say is more valuable than the silence it destroys. Every time you open your mouth, you are making a trade. You are trading peace, mystery, and emotional leverage for whatever noise is about to come out of your throat. If what you are about to say does not add clarity, truth, or power to the world, keep your mouth shut. Consider what happened when a nervous acquaintance ran up to Socrates in the streets of Athens, burning with desire to gossip. The man grabbed Socrates by the arm and panted, "Socrates, do you know what I just heard about your friend?" Socrates stopped, held up his hand, and looked at the man with calm intensity. "Before you tell me," Socrates said, "have you passed this information through the 3 filters?" The man blinked in confusion. "The 3 filters?" "Yes," Socrates replied. "The first filter is truth. Are you absolutely certain that what you are about to tell me is completely true?" The man stammered, "Well, no. I just heard someone talking about it in the market." "Very well," Socrates continued. "Then you do not know if it is true. Now, the second filter. Goodness. Is what you are about to tell me about my friend something good or kind?" "No," the man admitted, looking down at his feet. "In fact, it is quite the opposite." "So," Socrates said, "you want to tell me something bad about my friend, even though you aren't sure it's true. That brings us to the third filter, utility. Is what you are about to tell me useful to my life in any way?" The man swallowed hard. "No, not really." Socrates smiled gently, patted the man on the shoulder, and walked away, saying, "If what you want to say is neither true, nor good, nor useful, why say it at all? Think about how much energy you waste every single day talking about things that do not matter. We gossip about people we barely know. We complain about the weather. We voice opinions on news stories we haven't properly researched. We argue with strangers on the internet, burning through our precious life energy just to feel like we won a meaningless debate. The Stoics saw gossip and trivial chatter as a poison that rots your mind from the inside out. When you participate in cheap talk, you train your brain to focus on shallow, superficial things. You lower your standards. You trade the majestic stillness of a disciplined mind for the noisy, chaotic babble of the crowd. Let's talk about a man who turned silence into an impenetrable shield against the most corrupt political elite in human history. Cato the Younger. Cato was a senator during the final, chaotic days of the Roman Republic. Rome was filled with politicians who could be bought with money, seduced by fame, or intimidated by violence. Julius Caesar himself was rising to power, using slick speech and clever manipulation to bend the Senate to his will. While other senators argued, debated, and compromised their values, Cato mastered the art of withholding his speech. For long periods, he would walk into the Senate chamber, sit on his bench, and refrain from uttering a single word. His colleagues thought he was weak or ignorant. They mocked him, trying to provoke him into getting angry. Cato remained completely indifferent to their taunts. He knew a secret that they were too blind to see. Silence builds emotional reservoir. When you react immediately to an insult, a provocation, or an attack, you reveal your vulnerability. You tell the world exactly where your buttons are, and you give your enemies the precise blueprint to manipulate you. But when someone insults you and you look at them with cold, unwavering silence, you turn their weapon right back on them. When Cato finally stood up to speak, sometimes after months of absolute silence, the entire Senate floor went dead silent. Julius Caesar himself would clench his fists, knowing that when Cato spoke, his words were like iron spikes driven into the ground. Cato did not speak to be liked. He did not speak to fit in. He spoke only when virtue demanded it, and because he spent months holding his tongue, his words possessed an explosive, undeniable force. Imagine possessing that kind of emotional armor in your daily life. When someone disrespects you at work, instead of getting defensive and offering a messy, emotional speech, you simply look at them, let 3 seconds of silence hang in the air, and calmly ask, "Are you finished?" When someone tries to draw you into a petty family drama, instead of taking a side and adding fuel to the fire, you simply smile, nod, and remain quiet. You immediately become the calm center of the storm. People will naturally start coming to you for guidance, not because you talk the most, but because you are the only person in the room whose mind isn't controlled by raw, uncontrolled emotion. Consider the story of the Stoic philosopher Pachomius Agrippinus. He was a nobleman in Rome during the reign of the tyrannical emperor Nero. Nero hated Agrippinus because Agrippinus refused to flatter him or play his corrupt political games. One morning, while Agrippinus was exercising with his friends in the courtyard, a messenger ran in, pale and trembling, bearing terrible news from the Senate. "Agrippinus," the messenger cried out, "you are being tried in the Senate right now. Nero is condemning you." Agrippinus stopped his exercise, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked at the terrified messenger. He didn't scream. He didn't curse Nero. He didn't start making panicked speeches to defend his name. He simply asked, "In the Senate, will I be executed or exiled?" "Exiled," panted the messenger. Agrippinus nodded slowly, handed his towels to a servant, and said, "Very well, then let us go to my estate in Aricia and eat lunch there instead. That is the absolute pinnacle of Stoic mastery." Agrippinus didn't waste a single breath complaining about an outcome he couldn't control. He refused to give Nero the satisfaction of a frantic reaction. His silence was an act of supreme defiance. It proved that his inner peace belonged to him, and no emperor, no verdict, and no insult could ever steal it without his consent. Most people spend their lives reacting to everything. A bad driver cuts them off, and they spend 20 minutes cursing. A coworker leaves a passive-aggressive comment, and they ruin their entire weekend obsessing over what to say back. They are constantly handing the remote control of their soul to complete strangers. Silence breaks that cycle forever. Silence is the wall between a stimulus and your reaction. In that wall lies your freedom. So far, we have uncovered how silence builds authority, shields your emotions, and destroys the traps of gossip and cheap validation. But we have only scratched the surface of this ancient weapon. There are remaining master protocols of Stoic silence that go far deeper into human psychology. Protocols that teach you how to read anyone's hidden motives without them realizing it, how to use silence to make people offer you better deals, and the single most dangerous mistake people make when keeping their mouth shut, that can actually ruin their reputation if done incorrectly. Whenever you are ready to unlock these remaining protocols and master the ultimate art of silent influence, simply let me know to continue, and we will step directly into the final half. Let's step directly into the next secret of silent power, a principle so profound that it turns every social interaction into a space where you hold all the leverage. The ancient Stoics had a timeless observation. Nature gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth, for a very specific reason, so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. When you sit in quiet presence while others talk, you are not being passive. You are gathering intelligence. Most human beings are so desperate to be validated, so eager to impress, that if you simply give them a few seconds of uninterrupted quiet, they will spill their entire inner world to you. They will tell you their insecurities, reveal their hidden flaws, and expose their true motives, all because your quiet presence forces them to fill the void. In ancient Greece, King Antigonus sent royal ambassadors to Athens to host a grand feast for the city's greatest philosophers. The king wanted to see which of these famous intellectuals was the wisest, so his ambassadors could bring back advice to help rule his empire. At the banquet, the philosophers immediately began competing for attention. They shouted over one another, showing off their knowledge, arguing about complex theories, and trying desperately to prove who was the smartest person in the room. Sitting at the far end of the long wooden table was Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. Throughout the entire evening, as the other philosophers drank, shouted, and debated, Zeno sat perfectly still. He ate his meal, listened intently to every word, and did not speak a single sentence. Eventually, the royal ambassadors walked down the table, approached Zeno, and asked in confusion, "Sir Zeno, the other thinkers have filled this hall with grand speeches for our king. What message or great wisdom shall we take back to King Antigonus from you?" Zeno looked the ambassadors calmly in the eyes and said, "Tell your king that there is a man in Athens who knows how to keep silent. Let that sink in." While the other thinkers were frantically trying to prove their intelligence, Zeno demonstrated the ultimate form of wisdom, absolute self-mastery. He didn't need the applause of royal guests. He didn't need to prove he was smart. His silence wasn't a sign of ignorance. It was a sign of complete internal sovereignty. This brings us to a critical rule of silent power. Never announce your plans, your goals, or your future moves to the world. How many times have you set an ambitious goal, starting a new business, getting into shape, leaving a bad situation, and the very first thing you did was run to social media or tell all your friends about it? You talked about how hard you were going to work, how much your life was going to change, and how successful you were going to be. Notice what happens in your brain when you do that. When you talk about your future achievements, your brain receives a cheap, artificial hit of dopamine. It feels as though you've already accomplished the goal, even though you haven't laid a single brick. The urgency dies, the fire fades, and weeks later you find yourself right back where you started, having spent all your execution energy on cheap, useless talk. Epictetus gave a stern warning that every ambitious person needs to memorize. Never call yourself a philosopher, nor talk much among the unlearned about your principles, but do what follows from them. Do not explain your philosophy. Embody it. Do not spend hours talking about the person you are going to become. Show up in silence, and let your results make so much noise that you never have to say a single word. Think about the psychological impact of a person who operates in complete quiet. They don't post every detail of their life online. They don't brag about their bank account. They don't complain about their struggles. They simply disappear into the shadows, do the grueling work in private, and resurface months or years later with extraordinary results. That kind of person terrifies the lazy and commands the respect of the strong. They possess an aura of mystery that cannot be bought with money. People wonder, what are they working on? What do they know that I don't know? Why are they so calm? By keeping your mouth shut about your goals, you protect your energy from the cynicism, jealousy, and doubt of others. You keep the pressure locked inside your own engine, forcing it to push you forward into actual physical action. Whisper. Now, we must address a dangerous mistake that many people make when trying to practice silence. A trap that can destroy your relationships and ruin your reputation if you aren't careful. There is a massive difference between stoic silence and petty, passive-aggressive silence. Petty silence is the silent treatment. It is when you pout, ignore someone out of bitterness, or use quietness as a weapon to punish people because you are pouting. That is not strength. That is emotional immaturity wrapped in a mask. It shows that you are deeply hurt and lack the courage to handle your emotions. True stoic silence is completely different. It is not cold, bitter, or arrogant. It is warm, grounded, and observant. You are not staying quiet to hurt the other person. You are staying quiet because your mind is completely peaceful. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to correct every mistake someone makes in conversation. You don't need to defend your ego every time someone misunderstands you. Consider the story of the philosopher Musonius Rufus. Whenever a student came to him delivering a harsh, unfair criticism or trying to start a heated debate, Rufus wouldn't argue back. He wouldn't get defensive or list all the reasons why the critic was wrong. He would listen quietly, look at the speaker with genuine calm and say, "If what you say about me is true, I will correct it. If it is false, it does not concern me." Think about the sheer power of that mindset. When you know who you are, when your self-worth is rooted in your own character rather than the opinions of strangers, insults completely lose their sting. An insult only hurts if a part of you secretly believes it, or if your ego demands that everyone must perceive you as perfect. When someone tries to provoke you, attack you, or pull you into a screaming match, remember this: conflict requires two participants. The moment you refuse to supply your half of the noise, the conflict collapses under its own weight. Your calm silence acts as a mirror, reflecting their own ugly chaos right back into their face. Let's look at how silence gives you massive leverage in negotiations, business, and decision-making. In modern society, we are conditioned to believe that whoever speaks last or speaks the loudest wins the deal. But master negotiators and legendary leaders know the exact opposite is true. Silence is the ultimate negotiating weapon. When you state your position or make an offer, the most powerful thing you can do immediately afterward is stop talking. Shut your mouth completely. Do not fill the space with nervous justification. Do not say, "Well, we could negotiate if that doesn't work for you." Do not offer discounts before they even respond. The silence that follows a bold statement creates intense psychological pressure. The human brain craves resolution. Most people cannot handle 3 seconds of dead quiet in a high-stakes moment. They will panic, drop their price, surrender their demands, or reveal their true limits just to break the tension. By mastering the discipline of staying quiet when the pressure rises, you force the other side to reveal their hand while you keep yours entirely hidden. Finally, let's talk about the deepest level of Stoic silence, the quiet mind. Outer silence is useless if your inner mind is constantly screaming with anxiety, anger, envy, and regret. You can keep your lips sealed all day long, but if your internal dialogue is a chaotic storm of complaints, you are still a prisoner to your emotions. The ultimate goal of Stoicism is not just keeping your mouth shut, it is reaching a state of ataraxia, unshakable tranquility of the soul. It is learning to look at the madness of the world, the noise of the crowds, the sudden shifts of fortune, and realizing that none of it has the power to disturb your inner peace unless you choose to invite it in. When you practice keeping your mouth shut, you are taking the very first step toward building that internal sanctuary. You are learning to stop wasting your precious life energy on empty noise, petty arguments, fragile ego battles, and useless gossip. You begin to walk through life with a rare, quiet dignity. People will notice a change in your eyes, in your posture, and in the way you carry yourself. They will realize that you cannot be easily manipulated, intimidated, or bought. You become a steady, unshakable anchor in a world drowning in meaningless noise. Remember, your silence is your strength. Your words are your ammunition. Never fire a single shot unless it counts. If you are ready to take your self-mastery to an even deeper level and protect your life from the hidden traps that ruin most people, do not stop here. Subscribe right now to the Stoic Path for another video titled, "This is a Trap, 7 Things You Should Never Give Anyone, Even If They Vastav 424. Ask, claim your silence, build your mind, and step into the unshakable power that has been waiting inside you all along."